wanted to talk some about boundaries today because I think there's a lot of confusion, and the concept of having boundaries and then enforcing boundaries. There's a couple of books. One of the books is on our resource page and is a good read if you find yourself feeling drained a lot about how to manage your relationships with other people, both really close people and also people in your daily or weekly interactions. So there's lots to know, but there's a few key points that I feel like are really missed by people, especially when they complain, that person's violating my boundaries. I told them what I wanted, and they're pretty miffed about it, and it's understandable because they keep feeling hit in one way or another or violated in one way or another. That's what boundaries are about. They're about defining who we are, what we need, and being really clear about that involves self-reflection, getting really clear what exactly is it that I need to have change in order to not feel violated, and to love and accept oneself. For me, I'll speak for myself, when I really love and accept that there's something I really need, I can relax and come from a different place than when I'm not sure if it's okay for me to need what I need or want what I want. So that's the first step, is self-reflection. What's going on here? What are the actual behaviors? Not don't make fun of me, but don't say these kinds of things. Or when you use that tone of voice with me, I tighten up inside and I can't hear you, so I need us to work on that, and I need you to look at your part in that. So the first thing that needs to happen is you need to love and accept your own self and your own limitations, and that's a big piece of work, but very doable. You get to come as you are, as you actually are right now, especially to your close relationships. And so you need also to remember that setting boundaries, having boundaries and setting boundaries, is not about the other person doing anything wrong. From their background and their experience and their narratives, conscious or unconscious, they're doing the best they can with what they're conscious of. And if they're not, then they're not the kind of people you need to be hanging around with. If you sense that person really doesn't care and isn't doing their best coming from what they understand about themselves, about life, about you, then that may be a toxic person that just needs to go. But most people, the vast majority of humanity, are doing the best they can with what they've got, both their own inner information and the information they've gotten from you. So setting boundaries isn't about making judgments about other people's behavior. It's about noticing where their behavior drains you, causes you to doubt yourself in ways that's not helpful, is demeaning, is an energy drain in one way or another. And that doesn't mean there's any conscious intent on the other person's part to have that happen. It's just they're different. They come from a different set of experiences. So the first step is not to set any rigid boundaries, but try communicating very clearly the effect that their behavior, without shaming them. The more you can not shame people, the more they're going to be interested and able to open up. So if you talk about yourself in a clear, vulnerable way, this is what happens when this happens. This is what happens inside of me when you leave your socks on the floor and I have to walk over them several times. I feel demeaned. It disturbs my visual sense of peace, and it's hard, and I want you to know about that, and I want you to care enough about me to develop a new habit of picking up your socks and throwing them where I can't see them. You can be responsible for them in any way you want, so long as I don't have to see them. So it's not about controlling the other person. It's about controlling one's own environment, one's own emotional environment, one's own physical environment. So it's about building relationships where we're not drained, and sometimes that involves a vulnerable conversation, and that's all that's needed. I'll give you an example of that. Early on in my relationship with Tim, I started noticing that every once in a while he would poke fun at me, make fun of something. And I knew that he wasn't actually trying to hurt me, that he's got a great sense of humor. But the way that it would land would pull up my old material around being the youngest in the family, being teased by my brother, by my older brother, and feeling really helpless, and nobody pointing out to my brother and then setting boundaries around how he needed to treat me because I was his younger sister and didn't have the capacity to not be hurt at that point by things he would do and say. So I had a vulnerability there. Somebody very close to me was poking fun at me, and it hurt. Had I not had the background maybe I could have enjoyed just bantering back. And I can do that a little bit now. But it was an okay thing for me. I loved myself enough to know this pattern is draining me and hurts, and I don't want it getting, and I have a reaction I have to deal with whenever that happens in order not to shoot back something painful or just shut down. So I wanted to remain open. I wanted to feel good being around him, and I didn't want that pattern to continue. And partly because Tim is who he is, and because he really values me and valued our relationship. All it took was that vulnerable communication, and he stopped. He caught himself. He may have poked at me a couple of times, and I said, "That's a poke." And he'd just stop and say, "I'm really sorry. I'm working on it." And that was all that was needed. If Tim had continued poking me, I would have looked at him and said, "That was a poke. I'm going to leave for a few minutes." So then it's really, oh, that happened. I didn't need to take the next step of actually setting a boundary, because setting a boundary involves a consequence. Otherwise, we're just nagging. If we just keep saying, "You keep leaving your socks, I told you," that's not setting a boundary. That's nagging. And nobody likes to have someone nag them. And it also can come from one's own sense of helplessness when we do that, when we just keep nagging. But we don't actually get really clear that I can't live with this, or I can't live happily with this behavior. And it's something that may take some work, but we need to change it. If vulnerable communication a few times is not effective, we have to take the next step. So the next step is to have a conversation when we're not activated by the situation. And again, vulnerably communicate, but say, I've noticed that I've talked to you about this a number of times and it's not changing. And I think that's not because you don't want to change or you don't care about me, but just because it's a habit you're in. And in order to protect my own sense of well-being, I need it to get better. I need to see progress, and I need it eventually to stop. So to do that, I'm going to do something when you leave your socks out. I'm going to put them in the hall closet, and that's where your socks will be. That way I can take care of myself without picking them up and putting them in the laundry basket, which will just enable the behavior to continue. But when you run out of socks, you'll go, oh, she was serious. This is really hard for her. And she took the time to put them in the hall closet so that it would remind me that she needs this to change. If it doesn't change after that, after you've picked up the socks enough times that he ran out of socks or she ran out of socks, then the next step is to say, that consequence didn't work. So I'm going to need to have all of your clothes go into another space. We need to figure out some other space so that you can drop your socks wherever you want, but I don't have to look at them. So that might mean rearranging. You have your clothes in the bedroom. The other person has their clothes somewhere else. And again, it's not about punishment. It's about coming from a loving place. I don't want to be angry at you every time I walk in the bedroom and there are clothes or socks or whatever on the floor that I have to look at. So I want those somewhere else, and I'm willing to collaborate with you about where that might be, but I need it to change. And so the consequence is larger or different. And so that's what actually setting a boundary is about, an action that I take in order to take care of myself. It's not about punishing the other person. So it's really important in this whole process to remember that setting boundaries is about wanting to have a really good relationship with somebody and not have them do things that are constantly an energy drain and cause you to have to go through a whole process to remember that they're good people and that they're doing the best they can. That can be, it's much easier to hold that position if we aren't constantly doing things that we can change and need to change. Either we need to change the structure of the situation, or we need to actually change the behavior of the person, either one. So the trick is, once you start setting effective boundaries, you're going to feel better. And at first, the person that's having the boundaries set is going to be a little bit miffed. They'll either be a little angry that you're actually doing it, or underneath that anger may be shame that they haven't been able to change it without the consequence. And hopefully they might even be able to communicate that shame to you, and that you become each other's advocates around boundaries. instead of enemies. So, boundaries about taking care of oneself. They're not punishment. They're most effective when we communicate the need vulnerably and give them a chance to change. And then if they don't, tell them it's really got to change. And then either a structure change in how you work together or live together, or a boundary that makes it clear to them. People do not see the subtleties, and they give up on setting boundaries because they don't realize it has to come from love. It has to come from a place of, I really want this relationship to work. I'm not here to either control you or punish you. I need to control my own environment. Okay, that's it for today. I hope it's helpful. Thanks for watching.